So, this is a presentation report about becoming a development category by Nanda Shrestha. By me, Gina. Presented by me. So here is the table of contents, showing all of the slides. What this article is based on. So this is about the author going through tough times in his childhood and becoming more developed and more of a complete person. And this presentation and article can be related to different people from different places in all walks of life. Why this presentation was made. So this was made because I wanted to show people who see this about poverty and the struggles that happened to Nanda Shrestha in his childhood as a poor boy in Nepal. So, as a young boy in the small town of Pokhara, he was constantly known as a poor boy and had very little amount of food, very few clothes, and he grew up in a small house with a leaky roof and was constantly struggling with starvation. He remembers that one time at a big Hindu festival, it's tradition where the families buy new clothes for the children and they sacrifice an animal to the goddess Durga. That year, his family didn't have enough money to buy him any new clothes or even sacrifice an animal, bringing on social embarrassment onto his family. So, since he worked, he got some money, which he used to get the necessities needed for the festival. Manual labor was very common back then and would usually start with children at about 7 to 8 years old. So some people believe that manual labor was better than education, such as his father thought that manual labor was a lot better than education, even though he was doing both. So since people thought this, a lot of parents took their children out of school and put them to work. But children from wealthy families would go to different schools than they did, often in the Kathmandu Valley. And they would come back on their breaks fluent in English and in a higher standard that they were. And they would no longer talk or interact with the children, and they would treat them lower than they were. And the children that were treated lower would feel like more poor than they were and less educated. So British Christian missionaries came to Nepal and brought Christianity, modern medicine, and hospitals. So these hospitals and new medicine made the medical miracles that happened with local medicine happen even faster. And the missionaries made the people who followed the local practices feel embarrassed about it because their practices were better and more modern. So before, if a person touched a white person, they would have to be cleaned because they thought that white people were considered as monkeys and dirty. But later on, after the Christian missionaries came to Nepal and brought these new medicine and Christianity, they were moved up into higher standards. So after the missionaries, the Peace Corps volunteers came in 1962 to teach different subjects as teachers. So the high school that Nanda went to was one of the first high schools in Nepal that had more subjects than just the regular basic subjects like math, science, and English. So they had more subjects like home home economics, trade and industry, carpenting, and so forth. His school got new chairs and desks and other objects that the Peace Corps gave them as a result in an aid. So their school even had a generator that would produce electricity, and they had a nice tin roof with like windows and backboards. And to him and all of the rest of his classmates, it was like magic, like since they were all poor and they got to see all this new stuff and be a part of this like every day with all these different facilities. So the children no longer had to work as hard as they did before with the manual labor because the aid was helping them so much. But even though the school had so many facilities, it was harder for the kids when they came back home because it was like they were reminded that they were poor because they saw the difference from their school with all these nice facilities and different things. And then they came back home to not having enough food and back into this tiny space. But the school kept them happy, and then home reminded them of poverty. So since the aid gave the students and the community so much, everyone started relying on the aid, and the students viewed the Peace Corps as God because they helped them be as good as the elite kids that went to other schools. So now Nanda is constantly haunted by these images of his struggling and poverty that he had in his childhood, and he's glad that he encountered these experiences that helped him become a complete person and accept development. How about the author? So he was born in Pokhara, Nepal, to Jogman and Jogmaya. He is now a U.S. citizen and is a professor. He is married, has one child, grandchild, and he also has a dog. A dog! Okay. He currently lives in Gibsonton, Florida. Along with being a professor, he is also an author that mainly writes books and articles about Nepal and his childhood in Nepal. Here are some books by him that you can read about Nepal and his childhood. The end.
Yay.